Hey guys, welcome back.
Welcome back to the Sniffle Podcast.
Yes.
No, it's
don't
allergy
worry.
season.
There's plenty of sniffles for you. So if you get triggered by my sniffles,
You've come to the right place. We're talking about triggers today.
yes.
Okay.
And I will be blowing my nose and not sniffling that much. But we are talking about emotional triggers and how it has something to do with the spiritual battle.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And really the goal of this podcast is to give you the strategies that we find the enemy employing a lot of the time to keep you from the work of identifying these triggers so you can really move to a place of freedom and emotional integrity. Doesn't that sound great?
Yes.
Awesome. We'll see you in the podcast.
Hey
What kind
guys.
of a wave was that? Hey, what's up? Hello.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Oh, Forrest Gump wave going on there. Welcome back. Hey, we're continuing on exploring the points of awareness in the unique battle pillar, right? Today we're going to be talking about emotional triggers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got them. You got them. Maybe you're triggered by the word trigger.
That actually came up in a lesson or a coaching call. I'm not sure, but somebody's like, I am triggered by this word trigger. And so interesting. That person probably needed to do some mindset work on that. But
Yeah, this episode is for you.
yes, come and listen. So we're talking about the battle pillar and then emotional triggers being one of those points of awareness.
Yeah,
and
I got 5 of those.
what are emotional triggers, Matt?
Emotional triggers are where you feel activated, like emotionally activated by a circumstance either outside of you or even kind of like something in an interior perception of something.
Yes. Yeah. I have a definition here. So awesome. They're internal and external stimuli that we perceive as bad, evil, or scary. So it kind of, they kind of hit that, what's that almond shape thing?
The amygdala.
The amygdala.
Yeah.
The fight or flight response, right? And you're like, I'm out. I can't be around this thing. I do not like this. Or there's a strong aversion to it. Causing us to move away, fight against, or even indulge in the stimuli. So it's kind of, we have a couple different responses. The way that we act in our triggers are kind of influenced by our personalities, our past, everything like that. So
Temperament. Yep.
sometimes we fight against it. Sometimes we run from it. Sometimes we try to resist it or avoid it. Or sometimes we just kind of like sit in it for like a long time. I'm not really one of those.
Yeah.
The freeze, I guess.
I like to look at your triggers as like a habitual way that you emotionally react to
Yes.
something. Not respond, okay, but like actually react. All right. So the good news in that is because it's a habit, it doesn't mean that it's concrete. Habits are things that we can adjust, right?
Let me be clear. Let me be clear on this because I want to clear something up. Okay. So the trigger is the external or internal emotion, like stimuli.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
And then you feel a feeling and then you act a certain way.
Got it.
Okay.
React a certain way.
React a certain way. And so what you were
Habitual
just
way,
saying,
yes.
you were talking about the way that we react.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
All
Yep.
Cool. All right. So everybody has their own triggers. Everybody has a thing that makes them go, and maybe an example of an interior trigger would be like an emotion. Like I'm actually triggered by an emotion that I have, right? Like I'm activated by an emotion I have.
Yeah.
Let's just say as a sanguine, I feel bored and I'm like, activation, So I try to run from that boredom and I go and I don't know, like watch TV or scroll on my phone for hours and waste time. So like that's an example of what an internal trigger would be. Matt, do you have an example of an external trigger?
Well, internal trigger, I know another one is shame that comes up where as soon as we feel shame, we just kind of go, I don't want to feel shame. And shame often leads us to hide. And that's exactly what we do a lot of the time with that. We hide even the emotion of shame because we just immediately see it as bad. External triggers. I know for me and my secondary melancholic, just too much noise. Too much noise can just be too much for me.
Same.
And I know a big one for me that's on my pillar card is when I find multiple people needing me at the same time, and those people are emotionally reactive. So I remember being in a situation where we were taking care of Abby and Mark's boys.
Yeah.
And and they were dealing with kind of their stuff that was going on in that moment. We were kind of looking after the boys when they had to take a trip to the hospital. We were trying to get the kids to sleep on time. You were exhausted at that point. So it was like, I think Aaron emotionally needs me. I think Avalon emotionally needs me. I think these boys emotionally need me. And they kind of need me in different places at the same time. And I remember just like at one point, just kind of like shutting down.
Yeah.
Like just shutting down. So yeah, that was an example of a trigger.
Yep. So we have, it's these things that are either inside our mind, inside our bodies, or outside of us, but we respond we react to them emotionally.
Yeah.
Why did we pick this as a point of awareness? I kind of picked it. So I'm asking you this
because
question.
triggers are trailheads.
Yes.
I mean, like these guys,
Talk more about that. What does that mean?
Okay. So we got our stuff. Everybody's got their stuff, right? There's no shame. No shame in that. We're all on the road to perfection. We all are subject to original sin. We all have our stuff that we're dealing with. Okay. The way that we come to realize in the present moment, if there's something that needs to be dealt with, is when we start reacting in a way that we're not really happy with the way that we're reacting in that moment. And we're reacting that way because we perceive it to be something good. But if we look at the fruits, or it's going to lead to some good outcome.
Yeah.
Right. But if we look at the fruits and we find that it's leading to vice or hurting other people or hurting ourselves, we know that this is not something that we want to continue to deal with. There needs to be something corrected. The Lord needs to be invited into some place. And so we say triggers are trailheads. Really what it's doing is it's like, I like to think of it as somewhere deep in our heart, the Lord is knocking on the door. And that trigger is kind of like this echo that's coming up from the depths of our heart, and we're becoming consciously aware that there's a space that the Lord has not yet been invited in our hearts.
There's an opportunity, an invitation.
An opportunity,
yeah.
Yes.
It's an invitation. I think another reason why I wanted to pick this as a point of awareness, specifically for the battle pillar, is that the enemy can move our emotions and like diabolically, like the enemy of our souls can move our emotions. And he does that through our imagination, through kind of presenting this like, oh, isn't this like super scary or whatever? Like, but that imagination comes from like, that's really a thought inside of our head. So, and in our catechism 1763, and I think this is really important to for everybody to remember this. I feel like I've said this a million times on the podcast, but I'm going to reiterate. 1763 in the catechism, it says, emotions incline us to act or not to act in regard to something felt or imagined to be good or evil. So in this case, when we are triggered, we are imagining something evil, and we are acting in a vicious way, right? It's a vicious way because it's antecedent in that way.
It's a perceived evil.
Well, the perceived evil doesn't mean that we are going to act that way. But the reason why when we're triggered and it happens so fast, we know that reason is not involved here.
Okay.
We know that we're acting out of our antecedent passion.
And it's primarily, primarily by the fruits of the actions.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes. But actually what makes an emotion moral, and we'll get into this, is actually it's in regards to how much you use the will and the intellect.
To govern it. Got
yes.
it. Okay.
Yeah. So there's two indicators, two qualifiers of like what makes an emotion helpful. Okay. So we know that from a spiritual, warfare strategy standpoint, the enemy goes, I know I can move the emotions over here, so I'm going to do that. And look at our world right now. Everybody's triggered by everything, and it's just being moved all over the place because there's like this imagined evil, but it doesn't mean it's a real evil. It just is imagined. It's perceived.
Yeah, I can say where exploring this trigger has been really helpful for me is even in that example that I shared before, where I know that when I have multiple people needing me and I perceive them to have like very heightened emotions and this intense need to manage their emotions, when now that I can start to see that, and I'm like I consciously go, oh, I'm in that situation where I know how it feels in my body. Like there's a sensation awareness that's happening here too. So I know how that feels in my body, and I go, oh, she needs me over here. He needs me over here. Both of them are saying it needs to happen right now. And they seem to be very emotionally activated. And I feel really like the strong pull that I need to manage their emotions, where really it's about managing my own emotions at that point.
Yeah.
And I can look at it and I'd be like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. And so just being aware that of kind of my ambush conditions, right?
Nice.
I can kind of see when that ambush is playing out in front of me, like, I know what this is.
Yeah.
I can see where this is going, and I can see if I can continue to indulge in this. I'm just going to follow that shutdown path where I don't really serve anybody.
Yes.
Or really respond accordingly. And it jumpstarts the reason cycle for me.
Yep. Amen.
Cool. All right.
So what is it like? All right. So if we don't grow in awareness of this point of awareness of our emotional triggers, or even of our emotions, because guys, if we understood things about our emotions, if we knew the truth about our emotions, there's a very high likelihood that we won't be so triggered by them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? We won't have to run from them or fight against them. So really, why is, like, what's the pain that's showing up in people's lives to be like, maybe I should be working on this?
Yeah, I think you don't give that emotional separation. All right, the separation between you and your emotions, you become your emotions.
I am blank.
It's like, I am blank. So, and then that's even the language you use. I am angry. I am terrified.
Yeah.
And it becomes really something that we identify with on an identity level, and then it feels very close, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this trigger work helps us to get a little bit of separation, right? Which is needed in order to bring reason in and kind of take a look at these things. I think if we don't deal with this, we can be led around by our emotions.
Completely.
And it can really lead to a place of confusion too.
Yep. And abdication.
Yeah, and abdication. And then finally here, like, oftentimes the clients are talking, they just feel powerless to their emotions, which is one of the reasons why they pause and on even getting curious about them in the first place, because there's like a couple of lies that they deal with that kind of present them. Yeah. We're about to get into those right now. So that's really the focus. We're going to pivot over to part 2 of the podcast.
Yeah,
here.
yeah. And the enemy doesn't want you to know these things about your emotions, because once you start learning about them, you're like, oh, that's not that bad or scary.
The goal with this podcast series, you guys, is we're introducing these different points of awareness for our 3 pillars. It's about identifying, we want to help you identify the lies and the strategies that the enemy uses to even prevent you from exploring and growing in awareness of these things in the first place.
Yep.
Okay. Because when you can grow aware of these 5 points of awareness in each one of these pillars, it's a real gift to your discerning God's will for your life.
Yeah.
It brings a lot of clarity on what it looks like to move forward, grow in holiness in the present moment. So let's get into these.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
So the first lie that is about your emotions is, I will not be able to handle my emotions. Does anybody else feel that way? It kind of shows up in different nuances, but it usually leads to fear or aversion. You know, like, I'm not going to be able to handle it. Probably fear.
I don't want to explore my sadness because I don't know. Then I'm just going to spiral into depression. Or I don't want to explore my fear because then I'm going to spiral into anxiety. There's this thought that once we start to feel the emotion, we're just stuck in it.
Or it'll take over. Or
the emotion will take over. Yeah.
Or it's too big or too scary or too painful.
Yep.
And it really, what it does is it like causes us to avoid our emotions or resist them.
It also reinforces the thought that we have no power over emotions.
Yes.
It feels very powerless.
Yes.
And the science doesn't show that, you guys. Mm-mm. Like what we're seeing, even on a neurological level, on a physiological level, we're understanding so much more on just a physiological level, what our emotions are.
Yep.
And what those kind of sensual experiences they're very close to us, literally what's taking place in our bodies.
Yep. Even brain scientist Jill Bolte Taylor says that an emotion only lasts 90 seconds in our body.
Help me understand that, because I have definitely felt emotions for longer than 90 seconds.
Well, yeah. I mean, because you have a thought that's creating that emotion in your body. If you keep thinking that thought, then if that thought is on a loop, then it will go into that continual thing.
6 hours later, you're still feeling it. Yes, and it's getting more intense.
Yes.
So all you melancholics out there, right? Hey, we feel emotions intensely. Why? Because we have very intense intellectual lives. So we're thinking. So the more we ruminate, these things can kind of compound. And
you feel hard because you think hard.
You feel hard because you think hard. Yes.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah. And so also, like, this is kind of like cliche, but also very true. God won't give you anything you can't handle. Like, this is something that, by the way, Jesus felt emotions too.
Yeah.
And, and like, I don't know, he's not going to give you this like sense appetite in your body and this ability to feel if you're just going to be powerless to it for the rest of your life.
Right. Okay.
Like, it just kind of, I don't know, it kind of like says like God isn't good in that way. I don't like that's where that thought pattern leads.
Yeah. So like kind of the counter truth to this is like, guys, we have more agency over our emotions than we think. Mm-hmm. And nobody's really taught us this. This wasn't something that I was taught, right?
That's actually the next
I grew
point.
up very much in kind of the world of that person hurt your feelings. And so it's not that people can't do things that are objectively hurtful, but that kind of conditioning really has led me to a place growing up where it's just like, man, other people are responsible for my emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also just kind of painting a picture of what is the point of our emotions, and really like our emotions, just to make it not so dramatic, they're emotional fuel for moral behavior. That's why God gave them to us. Like it's emotional fuel. It's fuel for moral behavior. And ultimately, it's to love. Love is at the center of all of the emotions.
Yeah, you said, hey, melancholics, we feel hard because we think hard. I mean, like, and that may be like, yeah, you can love hard. Like, you can love really intensely, and you can be very passionate about causes, and that can be very inspiring. That can really be, those intense emotions can really be a gift when they're properly ordered, and that is possible.
Yes.
Cool. We got some catechism references. What do we got here?
Well, this just kind of gives some, I mean, we come back to these again, but Catechism says, 1765 says, the most fundamental passion is love, aroused by the attraction of the good. So we were talking about the melancholic, like just that understanding what God really like has placed on your heart that is truly good. And even that relationship with him, like you get to love hard. Like I think of the melancholic saints, and they were just so deeply in love with the Lord.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like St. John of the Cross. I mean, he was a poet. Like we study he's a doctor of the church, and we study his poetry because that was the language of that deep melancholic personality coming out and that deep love coming out.
So the counter strategy of this enemy strategy, which is the lie, obviously is the truth that we gave you some little nuggets of truth there to counter this. But also, if we were to address the lie right to its face, right? I'm not able to handle my emotions. Well, no, I am. God would not have given me emotions if I'm not able to handle them on my own. Yeah. Right. Obviously, he wants to be there with me through it. So the counter strategy is to ask the Lord to join you in exploring and coming to understand your emotions better.
Yes.
All right. Start with one emotion at a time. It's a little hard because we do feel a lot of emotions at the same time, but like start with one and then name it, feel it, actually experience it in your body. You will realize, oh my gosh, this emotion of whatever it is, shame, think of the worst emotion that you could possibly think of, embarrassment, humility, or whatever. Like you're feeling it in your body, and just start to take account and be like, that's it? That's all it is? I mean, the worst part is the story you're telling yourself that's perpetuating this emotion. That is the worst part, which can be renounced and repented of, especially if it's a lie. Which sometimes it is a lie. Sometimes it's truth. Like there's maybe some bits and pieces of truth in lie. But this is just kind of what we want to do is be in that space with the Lord. Explain it to him. Lord, it feels like this. It feels like a heaviness in my heart. And then ask him why it's here. Why is this emotion here? What am I thinking? Yeah.
I love that you're saying bring the Lord into it. And I want to say this too, folks. Sometimes that's hard to do in our prayer. Like to even, some people may not necessarily even feel safe around the Lord to kind of bring him into that. And like, I recognize that there are people that have some deep wounds, and we'll get into it in our wounds podcast a little bit towards God. They don't necessarily feel very trusting. Yeah. But maybe there is a trusting person that you have. And bringing the Lord's love into that situation may come by way of another person.
Yep.
Right? The Lord wants to heal our bodies through his body, right? And
through
other people. We are all parts of the body of Christ. And so entering into this through relationship is something that I think is important, right? We are wounded in relationships, but we are also healed and redeemed in relationships here as well. And so on a very practical level, Emily Adams, one of our resident coaches, she's doing a lot of work now with women's that really feel these intense emotions, and they just want to have a better grasp on it. So you can go set up a 30 for 30. What's up?
I'm just laughing. I'm laughing at what you told me earlier when you were like, I listened to our podcast on on like half speed or whatever. And whenever I laugh, I go, oh, like it's like really
it goes, like very, very,
so
very
every
rapid
time I
staccato.
laugh, I'm going to think about it.
Okay, good. All right. But again, back to Emily Adams. Check her out, CatholicCoaching.com. Get coached.
Yes.
You can set up a 30 for 30 with Emily. She's amazing. The work that she can do in 30 minutes to just help you feel a little bit more empowered in your emotions. Go check it out.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Second lie. Let's get into this.
Okay. So this is a lie just about the source of your emotions.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what you were saying before. You kind of nodded to this earlier, but the fact, or that a lot of people think, oh, circumstances outside of me and other people are the source of my emotions. They did this, so I felt this way.
And
blah,
I can
blah,
understand
blah.
that. Yeah,
Totally.
And, like here's why we can really have compassion for that, guys, is because we feel the emotions before we're conscious of the thought behind them.
Yes.
Okay. So like from just an experiential level, something happens, the kids start screaming in the next room, and then you feel the emotion. You're not aware of the thought. The thought's very instantaneous in that microseconds. You start to feel that emotional trigger as those hormones, neuropeptides, and neurotransmitters are being activated in your body, causing those sensations. You feel the emotional response. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
but the catechism says different.
Tell me more.
Yeah. We already covered it. So the catechism says that an emotion inclines us to act or not to act in regard to something felt or imagined to be good or evil. Felt or imagined. So imagine that imagination, like there is a conscious thought first.
I don't know if it's conscious in the sense that you're aware of it.
You're right. Yeah. It isn't conscious. Actually,
it's habituated.
It's habituated. It happens very quickly.
Yeah.
But then it happens though. There's a picture form in your head.
Yeah. That's so these patterns, these habituated patterns of that Aaron's talking about, these patterns of imagination, right? That happen so quickly. They've been habituated in our body because we've chosen those images, those perceptions again and again and again. The more we choose them, they become a habit. And yeah, it really is running on autopilot at that point. It's unconscious.
But you do experience the feeling in your body, like you were saying, like you experience that first.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And it starts moving you. Emotions move us, guys. Ex movere, what the Greek, it's outward movements. So we recognize this, and our catechism speaks to that too. Yeah. Yeah.
So outside circumstances, other people, your job, your dating status are not the source of your emotions. This is good news and bad news. Good news because there is another source that is actually within your locus of control and is your responsibility. But also, it's bad news because nobody told us this. We've lived our entire lives thinking this usually and blaming, these things for our emotions and really abdicating that responsibility.
I think a really good example of this, and I listen to this soundtrack all the time because I have a 5-year-old, is the whole song "We Don't Talk About Bruno." Right. And specifically, there's in the beginning, the couple they're talking about in their wedding day, there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and all of a sudden Bruno showed up and a hurricane came. And meanwhile, this woman telling the story is completely ignoring that she has this special power of being able to control the weather. And it's only revealed later on that Bruno was showing up to kind of try to comfort her, but she was choosing to kind of ruminate on all the things that were stirring her, and she's the one that actually caused the hurricane.
So interesting.
Fascinating.
That's like a really cool tie-in right there.
It's time to talk about Bruno, folks.
It's time to talk about your triggers. Really, that's what's happening.
Yeah,
let's talk about them. So, okay, these things are not the root cause of your emotions, and we've said this time and time again. It's a thought. It's a little sentence in your brain or picture in your head, but that picture has context.
Yes.
So it actually creates this is imagined to be good or evil. So I have to move away from this or towards it.
Yep.
Right. So that's a really simple one. That's just a truth bomb. And we're just going to drop that and then also give you some counter strategy. First, let's praise the Lord that he created us so ordered and that he also has given us this superpower of reason and wants to pour his grace into us, wants to be in relationship with us as we are working through this. Let's just praise God for that.
Yep.
I notice when you're praising God, the enemy does not want to be around. So that's just, maybe if you guys walk away with one thing from this podcast, do that. Own your emotions. That's mine to own. It is humbling, but also kind of a relief to be able to say that out loud to people.
Yeah, in a very practical way. It sounds wonky, but for some reason, guys, it works. When you're feeling an emotion, just say, I am feeling the emotion of blank.
Yeah,
right.
not
Rather
I
than
am.
saying, I am blank, angry, frustrated, resentful. Like, I am feeling an emotion of resentment. There's something about that just kind of creates a little bit of distance that allows space for that curiosity.
Also, I am feeling blank because, and it's not some circumstance outside of you. It's not somebody else. It's not somebody else's behavior, but because ... a thought I'm thinking. I am. So this is what you would say. I am feeling blank because I am thinking blank. Because so often we want to go, I am feeling blank because she said this to me. No. Pause it and go, I am feeling blank, whatever that emotion is, because I am thinking.
She disrespected me.
Yes.
She was mean.
Yes.
She's inconsiderate.
Yes.
Her hair is better than mine.
Also, I think this is another thing too. Offer up your suffering for those. Like, let's just say you are blaming somebody. Let's just say that you are reacting to somebody else's behavior or whatever. Offer up that suffering that you're experiencing, because we're not like invalidating suffering. Like there are some appropriate emotions to feel.
Or that
too.
people can be objectively harmful.
Yes, we're not invalidating that too, because people can be objectively harmful and can harm your dignity, your human dignity, and all of these things. So feeling sad or hurt is appropriate in those situations. So please hear me when I'm saying this. You kind of can't do thought work your way out of those situations because it's ordered.
Yeah, it's ordered to feel sad.
Yeah.
It's ordered to feel hurtful. We talk to mothers and fathers all the time that have their kids or adult children have left the church and they feel sad. And we can't talk them out of the sadness because that's sad, right? It's sad to think that your son or your daughter's soul is in jeopardy as they've left the church. That is something where it's like, rather than running from that sadness, it's like, all right, Lord, you're also feeling sad about this too. How can we unite our sadness? How can I'm participating in your very sadness. And now there starts to be something that draws you into deeper relationship. The beautiful thing here, folks, that drawing into a deeper relationship transforms you. And when you become transformed, so it's no longer you who live, but Christ who lives in you, that is where you are in your best place to actually influence virtuously somebody along to a place of conversion.
Yeah, and pray for you. Like, your prayer is so powerful when you are offering that that suffering, that internal suffering, that emotional suffering up for that person and uniting it to the Lord.
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say. I'm like, offer it up, not in the old, like, offer it up, like,
ignore it.
Yes.
Like, just suck it up kind of thing. Yeah,
right.
Yikes.
And pretend you're being holy. No.
Yeah.
Take that pain. It's valid. Bring it to the Lord and unite it to him.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I also think this is really interesting. The enemy is very envious of our bodies, right? The fact that we are made in the image and likeness of God, and God came in flesh. And so the two areas that he's most envious in, I was just reading this in that book, Liber Christo, or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
And
the Liber Christo way.
Yes. The two areas that he's most envious of is the fact that we can receive our Lord in the Eucharist in our bodies, which, by the way, that's where we are experiencing our emotions. Our emotions are sense, appetite, means it's in our body. And then number 2 is the fact that we can redemptively suffer.
That's amazing.
For others.
Yeah,
So
the angels cannot do that. Even,
Yeah.
Certainly not the fallen angels, but even the angels, they cannot do that because they don't have bodies. Okay. Let's move on to our third and final enemy strategy, which is a lie. They're all lies. What do we got? Okay, my emotions are bad and just get in the way.
totally guilty.
Shaming our emotions.
I just can't wait to get over this so I can live my life again, There's a lot of different ways.
I feel resentment and I shouldn't because my life is so good and I have all these great things and my kids are healthy and
yes. Yeah.
But I feel resentment and I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't.
Yep. Or should I just keep renouncing the sadness and, grief and just this kind of, it's almost an over spiritualizing of a bodily thing of your emotion. And so I'm not saying that there isn't some type of diabolic form of sadness. There is, right? And so I always like to say, let's do both approaches.
But it's not all.
Yeah, let's do both approaches. Let's just renounce it. Let's bind it, renounce it, whatever, in the name of Jesus. If it goes away, that's diagnostic. We found out, okay, it was probably of spiritual origin. But if it doesn't go away, that means we have to kind of go a little bit deeper and find out what we're thinking. What is that path, and is this emotion appropriate considering the situation? If you just lost somebody that you love, grief is an appropriate emotion. And to kind of just allow that to be there.
Yep.
But so often we think our emotions are bad. There is just, guys, this is so prevalent in our society. Emotions are bad, especially in the Catholic world. Aren't I supposed to never feel bad or never feel, I don't know. There's
or always feel bad. I think it's just if I feel there's even a suspicion of happiness or delight or any sort of desire, which really is just a great suspicion of the body. And it's a suspicion that that Christ has actually made his home in us. I mean, guys, this is what our baptism means, that God has made his home in you, all right? Which means that God is at work in you, which means that some of the movements of God in you that we start to feel and experience in our bodies, some of these have a divine origin, all right? And even our catechism talks about how the desire for God is of divine origin. So these desires that we have, a lot of the time, folks, divine origin that's there. And it also gets into I would say, a more of a Protestant understanding of our anthropology than a Catholic understanding. Protestant understanding, more Calvinistic, is that we have our very nature has become depraved because of sin. It's not what we believe as Catholics. Wounded, yes, but not utterly depraved by our
evil.
sin. Okay?
Yeah.
So when something's wounded, that means there's healing and a reordering that needs to take place. But when something is inherently disordered, we just need to get rid of it, right? It's not how we approach it as Catholics.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
So here's the truth. Our emotions are morally neutral.
Says who?
The Catechism of our Catholic Church.
What number?
Let me see. Where is it?
Sorry, called you out there.
1767. 67. In themselves, passions, also emotions, are neither good nor evil. They are morally qualified only to the extent that they effectively engage reason and will. Passions are said to be voluntary. What?
What? No,
Passions
they just happen to you.
They just happen to me. They just come from the outside sources.
I catch feelings.
Yeah. Oh, catch the feels. Yes. No, it says passions are said to be voluntary.
Wrong.
Either because they are commanded by the will, really interesting, or because the will does not place obstacles in their way. But I want to go back to this one portion where it's and just do a mic drop here.
And that was citing Aquinas too, the Catechism was citing Aquinas.
And that's Catechism reference number 1767. But it says, in themselves, passions or emotions are neither good nor evil. They are only morally qualified by the extent that they effectively engage reason. And then it says it again. It doesn't just say it once. It says it like 3 times in this one section.
Amen. I say to you.
Yes.
Truly, truly.
In 1773, in the Passions, as movements of the sense and appetite, whatever, there is neither moral good. There is neither moral good nor evil, but insofar as they engage reason and will, there is moral good or evil in them. Yes. Thank you. Like, I don't know why I can't read
So
today.
engaging the will is an important part here, because when and that makes sense, because where does sin, according to Aquinas, where does sin happen? It happens in the will. All right. So, and we can choose in our will the perceptions that we are going to, through which we're going to see the world, that image in our imagination through which we're going to see the world. And those images in our imagination will precipitate an emotional response. Okay. So in this sense, that is our will, the choice of the image that's moving the emotional precipitation.
I love it.
Big word.
Thank you. Guys, my allergies are so bad. This is why I sound like this. And I'm trying so hard not to sniffle.
Yeah. You sniffle hecklers. Give us a break. We get it.
Oh,
Invent a new microphone that just doesn't accept the sniffles.
yeah. Or you could take it through the trigger work that we're telling you, right? Maybe you're triggered by it. That's okay. We're all triggered by different things.
There's
So
another one.
all right. So the truth is the emotions are morally neutral. So when we say emotions are bad, no, they're morally neutral. Depending on A, are they moving us to immoral action, and B, are we engaging the will and the reason with them? Those are the 2 qualifiers there.
Yep.
Also, on the flip side, emotions serve a purpose. So they're not just there to kind of like annoy us and get in the way. They actually serve a purpose. And what is that purpose? Well, the Catechism tells us what the purpose is too. It says the human person is ordered to beatitude. So beatitude, if you look up the word, it means supreme happiness. We are made for that.
Pretty cool.
Right? And when we're feeling like I don't have that, there's a reason why we feel sad. That's kind of ordered when we don't have that, right?
Yep.
So there's a deep desire towards this supreme happiness, but he's ordered towards it we are ordered towards that supreme happiness by our deliberate acts. So here we go, our will. So we have to start moving towards that. The passions or feelings that we experience can dispose us to it and contribute to it. Dispose us to what? And contribute to it. To what? Dispose us to these deliberate acts that move us towards beatitude, but also to dispose us to beatitude itself.
Okay. Got it. So a lot of disposing going on there. I think another way, simpler way the Catechism puts it is that 1774 emotions and feelings can be taken up in the virtues or perverted by the vices.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So like I think if somebody has, a habit of envy, right? That's a vice. They might look at a situation where somebody's in pain and have a feeling of delight in their pain. Why? Because they already have a habit of a vice of envy, right? Which inclines them to look at that situation, the person in pain. Maybe they have envy towards that person, and now they delight in the pain. They have that schadenfreude. Versus if somebody has a virtue of mercy, right? They might look at that same situation and be moved emotionally to a feeling of compassion for that person.
Or even sorrow.
Or sorrow, right? Perhaps for that person. But mercy inclines us to really abide with the person in their pain.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful.
Cool. All right.
So, okay. What is the counter strategy?
Let's get into this.
All right. I like always kind of like going to the most simple version of this. And it's like, I always like go back to this. Emotions are data.
Dashboard light on the car.
They are data. So they give us information of what we are imagining and what we are believing.
Yes.
That's what they are. They're there. They exist. We don't need to be afraid of them.
Yep. Trickers or trailheads.
Also remember that they are morally neutral and that there is a redeemed version of them. Like Jesus felt the emotions. Jesus felt the full spectrum of the emotional experience of humanity, but he did it in the most perfect way. So that tells me that, oh, there's a redeemed version of all of these things. There's a really appropriate way to feel emotions, which which is like super consoling for somebody who's like always told myself, I'm like, I feel too much. I feel too hard. Like my emotions are bad. Like, what a redemption. Like, wow, Jesus felt these, and there is an appropriate way. It brings incredible hope.
It's super awesome to be a guy married to a woman also who's aware of this as well. And it's just like the work that this has done, this emotional awareness and growing and kind of aware of our triggers and even tempering some of our triggers. And the tempering happens by the curiosity. This is the stuff that we're doing in our academy, folks. When these triggers come up and you start to process through these triggers with a mindset coach, you can really start to order your mind.
Yeah.
Or even being aware of like what's behind those triggers is such a huge step towards freedom, and the process of freedom is to identify first the habitual ways that you're showing up that you don't really like, understand why you're doing that, have some compassion for yourself, and then start to engage your will.
Yep.
Lord, okay, like I want to start moving towards this other perception. Fix this image in my imagination that is continually leading me down this path of sin and vice and things I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Give me a redeemed image here. And again, this is the work, folks, that we're doing in our academy. So join us.
Yeah, and I also want to address too that emotions are not just in the way. Like they can be used.
Yes.
That's some of my favorite stuff I do in coaching is using the emotions appropriately. Like it's kind of like, how do we motivate ourselves with the emotions? Because listen, if we know what simulates an emotion, which is a thought, you can actually what?
Stimulate, not simulate, but stimulate.
Wait, simulate. Right?
Simulate? Simulation is like a simulation of an event happening. Stimulate means like stimulate. Cause it.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know what the word is, but you guys know what I mean. Like,
you know what I mean.
Okay, so now you just like threw me off completely. Anyway,
for all intensive purposes.
Stop. I don't say that. You did.
Truth.
So anyway, if you know what is at the source of an emotion, you actually can stimulate or generate.
Goodness gracious. Can we cut? Goodness. All right.
Generates an emotion that's useful.
Yeah. Like the mind, the will, that's our lever point for emotional intelligence and emotional management. I don't like even that word emotional management. I don't kind of like that. It's just like emotional integrity is really what we're moving towards here.
Maturity.
Yeah. Maturity.
Emotional maturity.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So cool. Hey, that's it. So those are kind of the 3 lies. Work through those lies. We engage those lies in the academy. If any of these lies kind of like felt, I've had that one pop up before. Like join us in the academy.
Yeah.
Or sign up with the 30 for 30. But like we're engaging your unique battle and helping you identify these things, growing these points of awareness that we've got, like your triggers here today. Because there's freedom on the other side of these things. And freedom not as an end in and of itself, but freedom to what? Freedom to become fully who you are in your unique design. That's our other pillar. And fully engage in God's mission and purpose for your life.
Yes.
That's our other unique mission pillar. It's like freedom to become fully who you are and engage in God's purpose. It's very meaningful stuff here, guys.
Yes.
Cool.
The end.
All right. Go to CatholicCoaching.com. Join the academy.
We'll
see you in there. Thanks for being with us. We'll continue on next week.
All right, guys. See ya.
Hey, thanks for sticking with us in the Catholic Coaching Podcast. If you like what you heard,
please like and subscribe, and we'll see you again.